I'm Jen. I'm an addict. I'm really nervous. So my story is I was born and raised in Greensboro, Maryland. I grew up in a very dysfunctional household. There was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse that was consistently going on. My mom and my dad, they separated when I was a little baby. My dad accused my mom of sleeping with another man when she got pregnant with me, and so that kind of set the tone for our relationship. I visited my dad every other weekend with my older sister, and basically like the whole weekend I would go without even talking to him. We had no relationship. He was a stranger to me that I saw every other weekend. And then my mom married a police officer with severe entitlement issues when I was 4. And he was just super abusive. He just constantly put my mom, my sister, and I down over and over again. I can just hear it in my head still to this day that you're stupid, you're ugly, and you'll never amount to anything. And I believed it for a very long time. When I was 7, his brother molested me, and that went on for a couple years, and I didn't realize the impact that it had on me until later on in life. I remember he was 28 and I was 7, and I would punch him and I would kick him and I would do all these things, and then my mom would see that or his brother would see that, and I would get grounded. And so I learned at an early age that what I had to say, what I felt, it never mattered. I went through a series of abuses like that because I was looking for some sort of fulfillment. I was looking for the father that I never had. When I was 12, my boyfriend raped me, and I remember I grew up in the church, and I went to church, and I'm grateful for that because without that, I probably would have killed myself a long time ago. I shouldn't be here today. I shouldn't. But I remember back in the parking lot of the church, doing all these things at 12 years old that now I look back at 33 and I'm like, how was I even doing these things? That's not what a 12-year-old should be doing. And, I didn't leave because I needed somebody to tell me I love you. I needed somebody to say, you are pretty. I didn't try when I was in school because I was convinced that I was an idiot. I was convinced that it didn't matter how well I did in school. I was going to be grounded anyway. And I got locked in my room consistently. Every day my stepdad would pick some sort of fight with me. He would take Tabasco sauce and shove it down my throat, lock me in my room. And my mom a lot of times would just kind of stay to the side and not say anything because she didn't want to deal with it either. So I was convinced that, there was something really wrong with me and nobody would ever love me. When I was 13, I was anorexic. I started cutting myself because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to deal with the pain that I felt, and I didn't understand it. And, I felt very alone in the world. I felt like, that people would just want nothing to do with me because that's what I was taught. Nobody likes you. Just stay to yourself. Don't talk. Nobody wants to see you. Nobody wants to hear you. When I was 14, I ended up finally moving out of my mom's house because after 10 years of the abuse, I just couldn't take it anymore. And so I moved in with my dad. And he had remarried, and they had a daughter. And so pretty much it was their family, and then I just kind of rented a room there. And then I was given all this freedom, and I didn't really know what to do with it. So I ended up meeting some, people, and me and this girl, we had a very toxic relationship. There was a lot of self-harm involved, and I just thought that was normal. I thought that, that's just what people did because who was happy? I didn't understand what happiness was. was 16, a friend of mine, I was hanging out with him after I got done track practice, and one day I fell asleep and I woke up to him on top of me raping me. And yet again, like, I just thought that, like, this is what's supposed to happen. Like, I associated love and caring with sex. I had associated it that way since I was 7 years old. And so I completely shut out the rest of the world at this point when I was 16. I just didn't want anything to do with anyone. I was tired of feeling hurt and pain, and so I just started to hate people. I didn't let anybody touch me. I wouldn't let anybody close to me. I just wanted everyone to just leave me alone. And then I started dating a guy who was older than me, and he could get me alcohol. And the first time I ever drank, I got alcohol poisoning. I remember being in a pool, and then I remember being in a bathroom, and my best friend changing me, and like it was horrible. I remember the next day trying to drive to work, and we had to keep stopping because I had to keep throwing up because I couldn't get enough of the alcohol out of my system. And that was the very first time I ever ingested it, and I remember just the next day saying, "Let's do that again." I didn't feel like myself, and that was exciting to me. So a couple years went by, and I barely graduated high school because I would rather sit at home and drink a fifth of Captain than worry about going into school and making the C to be able to pass my class. But I did, by the grace of God. And later that year, after I graduated, I started dating a guy who was 18 years older than me. I had broken up with the other guy because it got very abusive. There was a lot of fights. There was a lot of hitting. There was a lot of kicking and just, a lot of abuse. So I ended up dating this guy who was 18 years older than me, and he introduced me to Percocets. And that was when I felt like I had found the love of my life. I felt happy. I felt something that I never felt before. I felt like I was supposed to feel. That's what I thought, And I felt sexy. I felt like somebody wanted me around. I felt all the things that I was told I would never feel. So we started out, like 1 weekend a month. We would just get a whole bunch of 30s, and we would just party. Lots of, Bacardi and pills and just all of it. And it just went from 1 weekend a month to every other weekend to every weekend to every Monday, because it felt great to go into work and still be feeling how I felt all weekend, to every single day. For the most part, we were pretty capable of keeping up with our addiction, but our relationship changed, and there was a lot of anger, a lot of violence. I would hit him, he would hit me back. He broke my sternum, gave me black eyes. Like, there was just a lot going on, and I played my part in it too, But here I am, 19, 20, 21 years old with a guy who's 37, 38, 39, and I thought that that was normal. I thought that that was okay. I thought that he was my protector. All the while he was helping me diminish who I was. And when I was 21, I finally asked for help. I reached out to my mom and was just like, look, like, I have a problem and I can't keep it up anymore. And so she sent me off to Florida to rehab. She had finally left the cop, and she was dating somebody else who happened to be in recovery. And he tried to tell me a little bit about the 12-step fellowship, but I didn't really understand. To me, that was just a drug program, and I didn't have a drug problem. So I went to rehab, and while I was in there, I had a counselor sit me down, listen to my story. That was the first time I had ever actually expressed my story to anybody, and she just was like, I don't really know what to do for you. I need you to tell me what to do. So I was like, okay, great, I'm a lost cause. There's no hope, there's no coming back. But while I was in that rehab, I didn't hear a whole lot of anything else. I was sneaking off into the room with the boy. I was sneaking off to go, do what I wanted to do because that's what I had always done, what I wanted to do. And in that, I was able to somehow hear the message of spirituality. Like I said, I was raised in the church, so Jesus has always been a part of my life. But at that moment, I had realized that, I needed to turn back towards him. And so I didn't really understand the connection between me and God, but I knew that my Grammy, she was the only person that I could remember that loved me, and she passed away, and I could just go talk to her. And that was the connection that I needed to stay consistent with that relationship. Things spiraled from there. I got out of rehab. I tried to kill myself. And then I just started drinking again. Got back on the pills again. And then I was introduced to heroin. So I started using heroin. I was working 3 jobs a day. I was keeping up with the money. I was doing everything possible. I was selling it. I was, dealing with a lot of rough people, and I thought that I had a handle on things. I thought that, again, was normal. And I was constantly partying. I always had a Bacardi and Coke with me. Everybody who knew me knew that I always had some type of alcohol on me because I couldn't function without it, because I didn't think that who I was without it was worth being around. So when I was about 23, I hung out with this guy. We went to celebrate his friend's 21st birthday, and I ended up getting completely obliterated. And he was like, look, I don't want you to drive home. You can stay the night. You can sleep in my daughter's bed. And I woke up to him coming over to me, and I was in and out, blacked out, and he raped me. And I remember the next day I went into work, and he was blowing up my phone over and over and over again. And I just was like, look, dude, you know what you did. I don't want to deal with you. And he was like, look, Jen, I have to tell you, the doctor just called me, and he said that I have herpes. And I just wanted to give up. I just continued drinking. I ended up getting arrested. I was on drug court, so I was taking prescription drugs while drinking because I didn't want to feel anything. And I would consistently go over to the same person's house and basically allow him to continuously rape me for months because I didn't think that I was worthy of anything better. Finally, I got outside of that cycle with him, and I went back to the guy who was 18 years older than me. I bounced around from here to here, with older men, and that's when I started smoking crack. And that was a high that I had no control over. I did everything in my power to make sure that I could just keep getting more. I lost everything. I stopped working. I gave the drug dealer my car. I didn't care if I had a place to live. I gave up everything because I needed more. I ended up going and living out. First, I started down in Seaford, then I went to Coverdale, then I went to Milford and Lincoln and Ellendale and all down that area. And pretty much any drug dealer that would take me in or any trap house that would let me squat there is where I stayed. I constantly was living in places where I was not safe. I constantly was living in places where I was dirty. I was prostituting, and I thought that I was the best of everything that there was, while I was about as dirty as the slime under my shoe. I was okay with it. I was perfectly okay living that life. I had convinced myself that I would be found dead in a ditch somewhere, and that was just going to be the end of everything. Again, I still had this connection with my grandmother, and whenever I would see a cardinal, I knew that she was with me. One day, I had gotten locked up a couple times and did a few stints in the prison, and so I was constantly on the run. And I remember the last couple months that I was using, I wanted to give up, but I didn't know what to do. You know, like the speaker before me shared, like I couldn't do it for myself. I remember spending a lot of time withdrawing. I was living in this broken down camper. During the summertime, I would walk from one town to the other wearing a bathing suit top because it was so hot. And then during the winter, I had no blankets, no pillows, nothing. All I had was a old army jacket and 2 puppy dogs keeping me warm. And one day, I ended up getting into a big fight at the trap because I was selling somebody else's stuff out of that specific place, and they choked me out. They tried to kill me, and I didn't even care anymore. I didn't know what to do, but a girl that I knew, she needed to go get some money from the Walgreens, and I was the only one with a license. So I went with her to get that, and while I was in there, the police came up to me and they said, "Are you Jennifer Tribbett? We need you to come with us." And at that moment, for the first time in my life, I was able to just take a deep breath and knew that I was going to be okay. Something was different. And while I was locked up, it was like God had really shown up for me at that moment. God was there with me and let me know everything was finally going to be okay. But most importantly, I had to be the one to come save me because nobody else was coming to do it. My clean date is February 5th, 2018. And I went to prison for 43 days back then. They didn't have any of the maintenance drugs, so I kicked it while I was in prison. And I thank God for that. I think that was the best blessing that could have happened for me. And then I got sentenced to a rehab because there was a task worker that was in there, and she sat down and she listened to my story, and she was like, first she said, "God bless you." And that was the first time I felt like somebody actually cared to hear what it is that was going on with me. And, she was just like, "You don't need group care. You need individualized care." And so she got me from being sentenced to 8 months VOP, like the recommendation. I got sentenced to a rehab. So I went to this rehab, and while I was in there, and now mind you, I was the type of person that I sat back in the back. I didn't like to talk to anybody. I had that mentality that I was stupid, ugly, never amount to anything. Nobody wanted me around. Don't be seen, don't be heard. You're a nuisance, you're a burden. And that's what consistently went on in my head. And still to this day, it still rings in my head. And I remember seeing women who would do these groups or, that were just something different than me. And I would go up to them and I'd say, "Hey, how do you do this? How can I go back to, or how can I not go back to being depressed? How can I get better? What have you done? How can I be strong like you?" And I would get on their absolute nerves. But there was one lady who was in recovery, and she was like, "Jen, when you get out of here, go to a meeting, get a sponsor, find a home group, get in women's back pocket, and work the steps." She explained it to me that my life was just a jumbled up ball of yarn, and as I would work the steps, I would slowly pull that yarn out. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, well, that's going to take forever." But I was willing to do anything at that point because I was just so sick and tired of the way that I felt. I mean, wanting to die every single day, but not having the courage enough to just be done with it. I found out that God had a greater purpose for me. So I got out, I went into a women's recovery house, and it was Christian-based. And that's where I first got the Recovery Bible. And I was able to connect what it was that I was learning in the 12-step fellowship with God's Word. And I was able to really see the Bible for the first time. I was really able to understand that the broken, beaten down person that I was and all the things that I did are literally what it is that God is here for. And because I had this image of, the church that I grew up in where it was holier than thou, no cussing, no smoking, no interracial dating, everything. It was this little bodunk redneck town, and I was like, there's no way that I'll ever compete with that, And I got involved in a church, and they accepted me just as I was, In fact, they continued to invite me to come back. I ended up getting pregnant, and I never thought that I would be a mother. I never thought I was capable. I still to this day question that, but God knew what He was doing for me. And in that, having a daughter, after so many years of saying I don't want a mini me running around because I hate myself so much, or saying that I didn't want to bring a child into this world that had done so much damage to me, in having a daughter, I realized that I needed to do more. I needed to be more, because I didn't want anybody to ever endure the pain and feel the way that I felt. And so I had her, and at this point, I had 1 year clean, and I was 9 months pregnant. And I remember standing up celebrating my 1 year clean, and literally telling newcomers, just don't do what I did, but keep coming back. But in that process, I learned about step work. In that process, I built a relationship with a sponsor. I still was very against everybody. I didn't want anything to do with anybody. I definitely didn't want the hugs. But the fact of the matter is that I was learning that I was worthy of better things. And I wasn't as evil and ugly and all of those things that I had, basically convinced myself that I was. But I also wasn't greater or, holier than thou or any of those things either. I was just perfectly fine where I was at. And in that, I learned my self-worth. And I ended up breaking up with her father a little after she turned a year old. And because he wasn't treating me the way that I needed to be treated. He was very narcissistic. He was cheating on me the whole time. And that was probably the first time in my life I stood up and was like, I don't want to just be okay with all of this stuff. I deserve to be loved. And I rebuilt a relationship with my mom. She's in my life today. We have a very strained relationship. I still to this day struggle with looking at her as the person who was supposed to protect me but didn't. But I'm grateful for her. I ended up living with her and her now husband. For the first 4 years I was clean, and I remember being in her house and living in the same room that I had lived in while I was using. And I remember spending nights in there just wishing that I could go out and get a hit of crack because I was just so tired of feeling the way I felt, even in recovery. But I had a little baby laying next to me, and I couldn't leave her. She had nobody else in this world. She had to have me. So God knew what He was doing. And in the fall, after I had my daughter, I decided that I was going to get into school. I didn't really think anything was going to come out of it, but, they just told me just go ahead and do it. And one of the biggest things that's helped me in my recovery is just doing things. I don't think about it anymore. I don't plan on it. I don't, contemplate it. I just do it. Because I know that, God's got me now. I know that, He has plans for me to prosper, to give me peace, But it's been a long, hard, treacherous road. I've had to seek outside help. I've wanted to kill myself several times in this process. I don't get it perfectly every single time. I'm not, living this outlandish life that is, beyond your wildest dreams, but it's beyond mine. I never thought I would get to the place that I'm at today. And here I am. I've graduated with my associates in drug and alcohol counseling. I've worked in the field for several years now, And now I'm in a position in which I can go back to the exact prison that I used to get locked up and put inside of, and I can help men who are in this process, who have never even heard of recovery, who didn't even know that there's a way out, who I can empathize with, who I can help understand that, like, all the things that were said to you are not true. You know, God put me in this place today because of all the things I've been through, to be able to show somebody else that, like, you're capable of this just as much. You know, if nobody else is here in this world that can relate to what you're feeling today, it's me. I can. And, you know, we're talking about the person that shut everybody out. We're talking about the person that absolutely hated people. If I could get you to hate me, then that meant you couldn't hurt me. I didn't want to talk to any of you. I didn't want you to look at me. I wanted to avoid everybody at all costs. If I could stay in my house and never leave, that was better for me. And now here I am standing on a stage talking in front of a whole bunch of people, sharing my story. You know, it's been a long, hard road, but my God, is it worth it? You know, I'm not always happy. I'm not always, you know, in the greatest of moods. You can ask my boyfriend, he can agree. But ultimately, like, I have peace today. Even with all of the trauma, even with all of the hurt, even all the pain, you know, it's still there. It hasn't gone away, but, like, I carry it a little bit lighter today because I have an amazing God who helps me through it all. You know, I just, if any of you are new here, new to this process, give yourself a chance. You know, get out of your own way and let God in, because, like, I couldn't have done this on my own. There's no way that I could have done this. But, like, I'm just forever grateful, and, you know, I'm grateful that people see it today. You know, Zach came down and asked me because, I don't know, he saw something in me that I still can't see in myself. But that's all I got. Thanks for letting me share.